With the dust settling after E3 2021, Nintendo fans have a lot to look forward to in the coming year and beyond. Metroid fans rejoiced at the announcement of the first new 2D Metroid game in 19 years with Metroid Dread, and Zelda fans finally got to see more of the sequel to Breath of the Wild, even though we'll have to wait until at least 2022 for its release. We also saw the return of classic beloved series like WarioWare and Advance Wars, as well as more footage from the upcoming Mario Golf entry Super Rush. All in all, a pretty solid showing from Nintendo during a somewhat lackluster E3. But one game I'm not seeing mentioned much in post-E3 rundowns is a title I'm personally looking forward to quite a bit, and that's the return of the Nintendo exclusive Cruis'n series with the upcoming release of Cruis'n Blast. And real quick, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on everything happening with the channel. And with all that out of the way, let's get cruising. Now, before we get into Blast, let's take a quick run through of the previous games in the Cruis'n franchise. So, I'm a bit of an old head as I grew up playing the original games on the Nintendo 64, and nostalgia is certainly playing a part in my fondness for the series, but even though the games have all received fairly poor critical reception, I do believe there's something to be enjoyed here if you just take the games for what they are: dumb, mindless, arcade racing fun. So let's start off with the first game in the series, and one of the first games I got with my Nintendo 64 on Christmas Day 1996, Cruis'n USA. Cruis'n USA first came to the arcades in 1994 and was then brought over to the N64 around launch. Developed by Midway Games and a team led by Eugene Jarvis, the series kicked off with a no-frills road trip across the USA from California to Washington, D.C., and that was the main hook of the game: roadside scenery and set pieces loosely based on real-world landmarks that the announcer would call to your attention with memorable phrases like, "Cool, Death Valley," and "Whoa, Mount Rushmore." Even as a young kid, I thought this game was pretty bad, but there was something about it that kept me playing. There was a pretty decent sense of speed and enough of a challenge to make placing first feel rewarding. You could also upgrade your vehicle by completing a full cruise across the US, which would then give you an alternate color and faster version of the vehicle. You could also unlock a few secret cars beyond the initial selection of 4, which included a school bus, a cop car, and a Jeep. And even though Cruis'n USA had a kind of overall butt rock presentation, it still had a distinct personality. There were far better racing games on the Nintendo 64 with a lot more content, but I still have such fond memories of having friends over during the winter of '97 to race through Redwood Forest and Beverly Hills while marveling at the quote-unquote realistic 64-bit graphics. What a time it was. That following year, I first saw a Cruis'n World cabinet pop up in our local arcade, and it was just so strange to me. Cruis'n USA seemed like the kind of one-off game that would never see a sequel, but I guess even though it received poor critical reception, it actually sold pretty well. So after enjoying my time with Cruis'n USA, I of course wanted to see what this sequel was all about. And after taking a seat behind the wheel for the first time, I was blown away. As the name very obviously implies, this time around you're taking a cruise around the globe, with each race taking place in a different country instead of city or state. But besides a more varied selection of locales, this game just had more of everything. More cars, more tracks, more modes, and one of my absolute favorite additions to the series, the stunt system. Pressing down twice on the accelerator would give you a boost and put your car into a wheelie, allowing you to easily flip over oncoming traffic or perform a flip off a jump, granting you bonus seconds to complete the race. Pressing the accelerator twice while turning would put your car up on 2 wheels, allowing for a barrel roll like mega flip while going off jumps, again granting bonus seconds. And the last, most difficult trick to pull off was the super heli, which you could perform by doing a braking drift off a jump. All of these added features and improved graphics made Cruis'n World feel like a powerhouse of a sequel, and who could forget that incredibly inspirational theme song?
Cruising the world, yeah, yeah. You've got the speed, you've got the power, just cruise the world.
It wouldn't be until September of 1998 that the game saw a port to the Nintendo 64. This time the port was handled by Eurocom, who set out to do a better job of porting the sequel to the 64 than the original. Cruis'n World just had so much less jank than USA, and some of my fondest memories of the Nintendo 64 era were pulling all-nighters with my friends to unlock all the cars and courses. Next up, we have the third entry in the series, Cruis'n Exotica. This one is a weird one for me. I never really noticed it when it first came to arcades in 1999, and even though I picked it up when it came to the Nintendo 64 in October of 2000, it just never really drew me in the same way Cruis'n World did. This time around, with worldwide tracks having already been on the menu, Exotica aimed for an even more unrealistic approach, and that's really saying something for the Cruis'n series. Tracks now included exotic locations like a dinosaur-inhabited Amazon jungle, the surface of Mars, the underwater city of Atlantis, and Las Vegas? This was also the first time in the series where the driver of the car was visible, letting you choose from outlandish characters like a clown, an alien, a cowboy, and a baby. You could even drive a forklift this time around. Everything about this entry just screamed zany. But other than the over-the-top presentation, this third installment remained largely unchanged from Cruis'n World, so there wasn't quite the same jump as we saw from USA to World. And something about the presentation of this entry just seemed a bit uglier to me. I don't know if it was down to the port being handled by Gratuitous Games or just the overall art style, but at this point, at least for me, the series had lost its luster. Next up were two low points in the Cruis'n series and the last games we'd see up until 2017, and that was 2001's Cruis'n Velocity on the Game Boy Advance, an ugly and sluggish version of the game with far less personality than its predecessors, and then 2007's Cruis'n on the Wii, a bare-bones port of the 2006 Fast and the Furious arcade game with all references to the movie franchise removed after Midway lost rights to the Fast and the Furious license while working on bringing the game to home consoles. Certainly a sad note for the series to go out on. And that brings us to the triumphant return of Cruis'n, with Cruis'n Blast first landing in arcades in early 2017. I forgot how I first came across the game's existence as I had never seen it in arcades, but I somehow ended up on a YouTube video of someone doing direct capture off of an arcade unit, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a new Cruis'n game and it actually looked decent. Looking into things a little deeper, I found out that development of the game was handled by Eugene Jarvis's new company Raw Thrills, which included some of the original members of the Midway team. So I was pretty excited to see that the racing series of my childhood still lived on and was still in the hands of the people that brought it to life to begin with. I also noticed that the Nintendo logo was prominently displayed on the arcade cabinets and started getting excited about the prospects of the game coming over to the Switch. This was partially due to my nostalgic fondness of the series, but also because the Nintendo Switch really is a bit light on quality racing games. Sure, we have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Horizon Chase Turbo was certainly a welcome surprise, but other than those and Grid Autosport and the somewhat expensive port of Burnout Paradise Remastered, there isn't a ton to choose from. I think this was back sometime in 2019 when I had first discovered Cruis'n Blast's existence, and as time went on, I really started to wonder whether or not Nintendo would actually bring the game over to the Switch. It seemed like a no-brainer. They already owned the rights to it, the game didn't look so graphically intensive that a Switch port would be difficult, and the Switch could certainly use a few more racing titles. But I just began to think maybe there was some detail of the contract with Raw Thrills and Nintendo that would keep the game forever locked to arcades. But then of course we had Nintendo's E3 2021 Direct, and even though Metroid Dread's announcement was the highlight of the show for me, it was a serious hype moment to finally see the announcement of the Switch port of Cruis'n Blast. Now, since I've never played the game in arcades, I only have the arcade and Switch trailer footage to go off of, but I'm really excited by everything I've seen so far. Blast looks like a perfect modern reimagining of the Cruis'n series, complete with outlandish tracks and vehicles, an over-the-top presentation, an earworm of a theme song, as well as retaining the stunt mechanics that have become a signature part of the series. I have to say, I also really like the overall art style. It seems to go all in on the series' 90s arcade racer roots with a thick, glossy coat of neon sheen and colorful, updated visuals. This also doesn't seem to be a straight arcade port either, with the Switch version looking like it's going to have quite a bit more content. Along with the original 5 of the arcade version, the Switch version will have 25 additional tracks, as well as new game modes to choose from. I'm not sure if these vehicles were available in the arcade, but I caught a glimpse of not only a four-wheeler and a fire truck, but also a helicopter, a UFO, a tank, a unicorn, and a dinosaur in the Switch trailer. Being a big physical game collector for the Switch, I was also excited to see Raw Thrills announce via the official Cruis'n Blast Twitter account that the game would see a proper physical release from Game Mill Entertainment. We're still waiting on an exact release date other than fall 2021, but apparently that should be happening soon. So there you have it. If you're a longtime fan of the series, Cruis'n Blast looks to be a faithful return to everything that made the best of the Cruis'n games so fun, and if you're just a fan of arcade racers or video game junk food in general, I think Cruis'n Blast will give you a solid dose of dumb 90s nostalgia with just the right amount of heart. Let me know if you're looking forward to Cruis'n Blast or if you've managed to play it in the arcades down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like on your way out and also consider subscribing. And until the next video, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.